a system of elimination because of scarce resources. So definitely I was cut out. There were very few sports in architecture. I think there were 100 out of the whole country, so I did not make it into architecture. So I quickly pivoted. I learned the art of pivoting very early to law. I told my dad, hey, how about we try and get into law? And I realized law was equally competitive. And I did not make it into law. So I decided thereafter, almost resigned and said, okay, whatever I need to do. But my dad told me at that time, there is this career called economics that you should do. And I have spoken to a few of my friends, and some of them are professors in Keynote University, and that's where you should go and you should do economics. That's how I landed up doing economics, which I later on fall in love with very much. Did economics, graduated in Keynote University with my bachelor's, and then I worked in Kenya. At that time, it was very difficult to work as an economist in Kenya. You either go to the Ministry of Planning or you go to the Central Bank. Central Bank was our aspiration of choice, but they selected, I think, only one student who got first class. So again, thereafter, I worked in the private sector in Kenya and worked within the opening internet. At that time, I think it was Formnet Africa, so I worked for Formnet Africa, and then did also some business for a family member who opened a cyber cafe and learned computers. So thereafter, I decided to say, hey, I need to go to, I really wanted to come to the US to do a master's program. So I decided to go and work. I worked in Dubai for 2 years as a springboard to come to the US to do my master's program. I got an opportunity to come to Georgia State. I did my master's in economics, called it traditional economics, pure economics. And then I did my PhD in economics. Now, having done that, as Jennifer mentioned, we got an opportunity to stay here, and we started work for different companies. At that time, one of my early jobs was, as I was a student, I worked for a mortgage company, secondary lending, and that's why I learned about the mortgage industry in the US. So they were backbone providers for a number of companies that were lending, and there was a boom. At that time, a mortgage boom, so I worked there and I learned a lot about the equity markets and what they do to finance mortgages. And thereafter, I worked at Cox Communication, and after Cox Communication, I went and worked for Bell, which was later acquired by AT&T. And then from there, I went to Aspen Marketing, and then now I work at Equifax. So I lead a team of data scientists. I work within the data analytics for the US market, the US and Canada market, and I lead a team of data scientists, and we build a number of predictive models for what you call the credit risk models. And Equifax, for those who are not very familiar, is one of the 3 credit bureaus. I think that's like something similar back home. So it's one of the 3 credit bureaus there. So it's been a long journey in terms of the career. There are many things that I've gone through in terms of the career. And the reason I was talking about that story, I think for the young people, is that there are a number of things that I remember doing when I was a student, actually here at Georgia State, which really would position you for success as you enter the market. So one of the things that I learned at a very early stage when I was doing my graduate program, at that time we had programs like SAS. SAS was one of the tools which was for data mining. I think now there's a lot of use for Python and open source software. We were given these tools, but we were not really taught these tools. It was just like, hey, there's a tool, you have to go build your models for either you're doing a dissertation or a research paper. And I've come to learn that you've got to do more beyond just the bare minimum to pass that class. You've got to put in a lot of time to realize that you've got to get good mastery in some of these tools because they will later on translate something. Remember when I said I was in Kenya and I worked for a company that was doing a lot of a cyber cafe work, and we also had an education department. That was my foray into working with a lot of Microsoft Office tools. So I learned how to use a lot of that at a very advanced level, learned how to program at the back end of some of those programs, and those have translated very much to what I use even today in my career. So I think what I have learned there is do not despise humble beginnings. You've got to use what you have. You'll be amazed that you can always pick up something from every job. You can always pick up something from any particular facility, activity that you're given that will translate down the road. So that tooling that I learned in college, learning SaaS, perfecting that, gave me a competitive edge. And as once I graduated in my economics, I really pivoted very much into a lot of heavy statistics. And in that heavy statistics, there's a lot of programming that we do even before you come to the statistical work. So at my current job, we are dealing with billions and billions of records. We were doing big data before big data became a thing. And the only way you can manipulate that data, you can even get to answer what you're being asked to, is to really have mastery in how you can sift through that data, how you can summarize it before you even get to the question that a supervisor is asking you. So I would really encourage a lot of my colleagues who are in their program, some of them are about to do their research presentation, to be accepted that you just pay attention to the tools that you have, pay attention to the work that they're doing with the professors. It may be a small project, it may be something that the professor is keen on. There's an opportunity that you can learn and leverage and go in depth with that. And I think also what I've also learned is that there is a difference that I saw in the academia world and what we see in industry. One of the challenges that I faced when I was in academia was the limitation of some of these things because it's very proprietary. Yeah, so when I was doing my PhD, I remember calling a company and they told me to give me my dissertation data was going to cost me $250,000. And I was like, oh wow, can you just probably offer that for me as a service? And they were like, no, we're not in the business of giving our data free. But I learned later on in industry that if you work in industry, there are ways that you can partner with college professors. My company is partnering with a lot of college professors. So I think this type of meetings is really important for that networking. Because you get to meet different people who expose you to different things that you're probably not privy to, that can definitely advance your career and position you for that success. So it has been an interesting journey, met different people, different cultures along the way, and we're going to talk about some of that now and different sections of what we learned during the journey. So the first topic that we want to talk about is culture. So the question is, the issue is when you work, our work experience has made us realize there's a cultural difference with our background and what we've seen. So for example, many times when we come from, like when we grew up in Kenya, we were taught that when you're talking to an elder, you're not supposed to look at them in the eye. You know, that was something that we just don't look at. If you talk to your parent, they probably say, why are you looking at me? why are you looking at me like that? And there was a consequence to that. So that was a cultural difference. I remember one of my college professors, he told me to call him Mark. And I was like, there is absolutely no way I can call you Mark. I will have to call you Mr. Mark. And he got very upset about that. There was a cultural difference. But the way he was relating to me is that he wanted me to feel free and to express myself, so that's why he said, I need you to call me Mark. At work, many people, most of our work experience has been like, you have to realize that if you talk to people, you have to look at them in the eye, you have to be very firm in your position, and if you do not do that, they misconstrue that maybe there is some dishonesty, and even if you know something well, you probably will not position yourself for success if you're not attuned to some of those cultural differences.
And I remember one time while I was working at Coca-Cola, I had worked on this project, and it had taken me months to work on this project. And it was my project. But when it came to, the vendor wanted to showcase it at this national conference. And when it came to showcasing the project, my boss at that time said, no, you should not go present. Someone else from IT was going to present it. And typically I would have sat behind and be like, okay, I guess my boss knows why they're asking this other gentleman to go present. But remember, it was my project, I worked on it, I worked with the vendor. And I went back and pushed back and I said, no, but it is my project. I should be the one presenting this project. And in the end, he did he did let me go and present. And out of that project, another organization saw what we had done, and I won a national award because of that. So when I think about how I was taught is that, oh, just be quiet, let someone else knows better. No, the culture here is if you have ownership of something that you're doing, then own it. Don't let someone else take the glory for the work that you have done. It goes against a lot of our, what we were taught and what was ingrained in us, that let your work sell for yourself. But the culture here is you need to advocate for yourself. You need to make sure that your work is reflected the way you want it to reflect. So that's something we really wanted to mention about the culture, getting to understand those nuances between where we came from, where it is. And culture is not only just the American versus Kenyan, it's also your company culture or your school culture or your wherever you are working in. Trying to understand how people operate. That is very key for you to advance, for you to be successful in that culture. Because someone else, we work in, I work in healthcare, he works in a data company. Their culture is very different from mine. One of the taglines our organization has is, you have to be easy to do business with. So everybody is very polite, because they want to be very easy to do business with. For him, he always tells me it's cutthroat. Everybody wants it now, and there's no ifs and buts. So just try to understand the different cultures you're working in. Do you want to add?
Yes, the other thing that we have also experienced is, given that our background is from Kenya, and we came here at a relatively advanced age, our intonation is very different. So we learned at a very early stage in our career is you can be very good at something, but the part that you pronounce something wrong, some people think you are dumb. So I realized this a long time ago when I was starting my career. I think probably at Bell South and all that. I would do my presentations and I would be talking in the room and somebody says, two people are seated there and they're saying, do you understand what he's saying? And somebody says, no, I don't understand what he's saying. And they venture to interpret that for you. And you're right there in the meeting. So that can throw you off balance. And there is sometimes an association of accent being that you don't know what you're talking about just because maybe you're not giving the right intonation as an American or how they are here. Now, I will say granted that sometimes your intonation can prevent communication, so somebody doesn't understand, but there is somebody just pushing you aside because they're not making an effort. So we should be cognizant of that. So one of the things that we have learned to do is, okay, you have to really sharpen. If you cannot intonate something where it's going to be a barrier, then probably spend more time on your presentation slide. Or give additive material. So that way, if somebody says they don't understand, like I learned after that, I would go to those subsequent meetings and somebody says, I don't understand what you're saying. I'm like, well, we're on slide 3. You can follow along, and the notes are very clear. So that kind of like puts them in check. You don't have to be rude about it, but you can be firm, knowing that you're well read in your material, you're going to present it well, and of course you should also change. And sometimes they say that you talk too fast. So yes, you can take that feedback and probably slow your words so that they can understand. Because the whole objective of when you're communicating something is for people to understand. But I think the issue there with the culture is trying to make sure that you're not thrown off because of the cultural difference. Plus, a reminder for me has always been when I was doing my graduate program, I had a lot of colleagues who are from Asian countries and they could barely communicate in English. And yet they got PhDs with very high distinction and were writing papers and were very theoretical. So if you look past the language communication, you can really get substance of that, and a number of people are very cosmetic and they don't see that. So that is something to pay attention to if you want to continue to build the services.
So the next topic we had was all about networking, but I think all of you get an A+ because you're at this conference. You're networking here. But I did want to mention that with networking, for me, what has worked for me is plugging myself into organizations that speak to things that I do. So for example, one of the applications that I manage is called ServiceNow. And ServiceNow has what we call user groups. And so there are always user group meetings every month in Atlanta that I'm always going to, or I'm always looking to present at, not of late, but before. So networking is not just a matter of going and getting someone's card or getting a connection. It is much more than that. It is figuring out what am I giving, what value am I bringing to them, and what value are they giving me. Exchanging cards or exchanging LinkedIn profiles is just the bare minimum. How do you follow up on that? Okay? How do you follow up? Do you send a note and say, hey, it was, always put something in their mind to remind them of you? Because when those jobs or when those opportunities come, they will remember, oh, Esther sent me a note about this. Maybe she'll be interested in this, so let me send it to her. Remember the job I told you about when I joined Coca-Cola? My manager was my skip level manager, but I had done a project at McKesson, and I presented to my immediate manager, but then I was like, oh, let me send this presentation to my skip level manager. So she knew about me. So when she moved to Coca-Cola and there was a job opening under her team, she remembered me. So, and she was like, okay, there's a job here, come and interview. So a lot of opportunities that I've gotten, not only career-wise, I am very plugged into our church, and I also lead, we have a camp for kids that we raise funds for. Most of those have been because of conversation that I had, and then I followed up. So with the networking piece, what I always say is that don't do the bare minimum. Take it a step further. Send a note. Send an article that may pique the interest of the person that you're connecting with. And so that's another thing we had talked about in terms of how do you get yourself out there, how do you become connected and successful.
So networking is very interesting, and to me, network is a continuum. Yeah. I don't even have any mathematical professors in the house, but networking is not static. When we talk about networking, it is easy to network when there's a commonality. So being here with Kenyans is very easy for me. There's some commonality, language, and what we can discuss, and I can network. But you have to get out of your comfort zone and your element to network. So if you find yourself in an institution with different cultures, you have to figure out how do I network with people of different cultures. There are some cultures that just network easily. There are some cultures where it's very difficult to network. So and then also at the different stages in your career, the networking changes because the value that you may get from networking is very different. At a very early stage in the career, you can network because you want people to know you, or you want to understand the environment you're working. Now, the more you are in a particular, either college, either you're a professor there, or if you are doing your graduate program, and if you get into industry, as you go and you're very tenured, the purpose of networking changes. You start shifting from just general networking to networking up. And networking down is very different. And networking horizontally is very different. For me today, my most difficult challenge is networking up. Being in a senior position and discovering I'm just a couple of steps away from all the major decision makers, networking up is very, very different. Because you're finding people who are very busy, they may give you time for 30 minutes, and you have to have a real purpose. And sometimes going to some of those meetings are like, okay, what am I going to discuss? There's no time to discuss how is the weather or how is your children. Some people are interested in that type of talk. Some people are just interested in what do you, I remember I was at Cox Communication, and I went to talk to this guy who actually had a PhD in economics too. And he was leading the marketing division, and I was working in the engineering department, and I really